Mr. Right here. We are going to learn how to solve quadratic equations by factorising. Now, there's a first thing to understand, and then we can crack on. Now, the first thing to understand is that if you have two numbers, I'll tell you what, write down two numbers. Perhaps you've written down 4 and 6. Multiply them together, work out their product, and the product of my two numbers is 24. Okay, in a moment, pause the film, and what I want you to do is to write down two numbers, but I want their product to be 0. Pause the film and give that a go. Right, two numbers that have a product of 0. So, for example, 1 and 3, that doesn't work. To have a product of 0, 10 and 0. 10 zeros is 0, that works. Or 0 times something, like 0 fours are 0. So to have a product of 0, one of my numbers must be 0. So the first thing to understand is that if you have two numbers which have a product of 0, then one of the numbers must be 0. Okay, now if you've got your head around that, we're ready to solve equations that look like this. So we're going to use our understanding to solve these equations. In this first equation here, in number 1, we've got two numbers, x times y equals 0. Now, we know that if their product equals 0, then one of them must be 0. So the answer here would be x equals 0 or y equals 0. You see, if x is 0, it doesn't matter what y is. X times y will be 0. And similarly, if y is 0, it doesn't matter what x is, because x times y will still be 0. Have a look at number 2. The solutions to number 2 are if a times b times c, the product of those three numbers, is 0, then either a must be 0, or b must be 0, or c must be 0. There are three answers. Let's have a look at number 3. Right, here we've got one number, x, multiplied by another number, x minus 10, and their product is 0. So in order for the product of these two numbers to be 0, either the first number must be 0, or the second number, which is x minus 10, must be 0. Now, what value of x will make x minus 10 equal 0? The answer is that if x is 10, then 10 minus 10 is 0. So in this case here, you've got two answers to this equation. The first answer is if the first number equals 0. If x equals 0, easy. And the second answer comes from x minus 10 being equal to 0. And that gives us the answer x equals 10, because it's a value of x equals 10 that makes x minus 10 equal 0. So look at this one. Number 4. Again, I've got two numbers. And both of my numbers, when multiplied together, equal 0. So that means that one of my numbers must be 0, and that will be an answer to the equation. So one of the answers to my equation will come from this first number, equaling 0. That's easy, x equals 0. And the other answer to my equation will come from whatever value of x makes this second number equal to 0. Now, what value of x makes x plus 2 equal 0? Answer, when x is minus 2. Number 5. Can you write down the two answers for this equation? My first number is x plus 3. What value of x makes that equal to 0? Answer, when x is minus 3. And my second number is x minus 20. What value of x makes that equal to 0? Answer, when x is 20. Okay, a couple more examples. Now I've got three numbers multiplied together this time. Can you write down my three answers? So my three answers are x equals 0, because that makes my first number equal to 0. or x equals minus 4, because that makes my second number equal to 0, or x equals 6. Okay, last one. What values of x will make this equation work? Well, the left-hand side is just x minus 7 multiplied by x minus 7, isn't it? And now it looks like one of my previous examples. What value of x will make the first number equal to 0? Answer, x equals 7. And it's the same answer for making the second number equal 0. So in that case, there's only one solution. Okay, right. So now we've used that understanding to solve those equations. And now, at last, we can work on solving quadratic equations by factorising. So here's a quadratic equation, number 1. It's set equal to 0, and I'm going to factorise the left-hand side. If I factorise the left-hand side, I get that. And now, using my previous understanding, I can simply write down my answers for x. The answer for x that makes the first number equal to 0 is minus 2, and that makes the second number equal to 0 is minus 3. There you go, the quadratic equation solved by factorising. Number 2, factorise the left-hand side. Pause the film if you want to do it before me. So it's going to be x and x, multiplying to a positive 12, but adding to a negative. It's going to be 4 and 3. So I factorise the left-hand side, and now I can simply read off my possible answers for x. Number 3, before you do anything, you need to have the right-hand side equaling 0. So I'm going to plus 3 to both sides. So I'm going to set the equation equal to 0 by plussing 3 to both sides, and now factorise. 1 and 3, plus and plus. So my two possible values for x there are minus 1 and minus 3. Number 4, again, the equation needs setting equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides first. Okay, and now factorise. You could pause and do it ahead of me. Multiplying to a minus, and I've got minus 2x's, so it's going to be plus 4 and minus 6. Just check that works out, and now I can simply write down the values of x which make each of my two expressions equal to 0. Right, number 5. First thing I'm going to do is set this equal to 0 by minusing 56 from both sides. Now, looking at this one, it looks a bit more difficult, but do you see how everything has a common factor? 2 goes into everything. So before I try the more complex factorization, I can simply take 2 out of everything. So always look for a common factor first. Now I can factorize as usual. I'm going to have x and x. I've got multiplying to minus 28, so I'm going to have a positive and a negative. It's going to be 7 and 4. And so what values of x make each of my 3 numbers on the left-hand side equal to 0? Well, no value of x will make the 2 equal to 0, but x equals minus 7 will make x plus 7 equal to 0, and alternatively x could be 4. All right, last example, number 6. Now, this time when I look to factorize, I can't take out a common factor, and I've got a coefficient on the x squared. So this is going to be slightly more complex. Let's figure it out. I've got to multiply to 2x squared, so I'm going to have 2x and x. I'm multiplying to a positive, and I've got positive x's, so it's plus and plus. Now, my two numbers multiply to 7. Either got to be 7 and 1, or 1 and 7, haven't they? So I'm going to try 7 and 1. Let's see how many x's that would give me. 7x's and 9x's. Sorry, 7x's and 2x's make 9x's, so that's not going to work. So instead, it must be 1 and 7. Let's just check that. If I were to multiply that out, I get 1x from the nose, 14x from the mouth would give me the 15x. It's good. So there it is factorised. And now I need to write down my two answers. Well, what values of x will make the first bracket equal to 0? What value of x makes 2x plus 1 equal to 0? The answer is that x would have to be a half, minus a half. And what value of x would make the second bracket equal to 0? The answer is minus 7. Okay, so that's how to solve quadratic equations by factorising. You'll find lots of opportunities for practice later on in this playlist. If you've got a question, please do leave it in the comments. If you'd like extra help, please leave me a comment in the comments. And if you found this video useful, please press like, because that will spread the word.